Tracy, do you want to say about how you pray? You
I
hate to have to beg
personally
the decision makers?
just hope that the right thing is done, that everything is looked over carefully, um,
It's a
and that they
video.
take into consideration the video and just the facts. You know, my mom, she wasn't treated fairly, and I hope justice really does come to light for her.
And then lastly, uh, Tracy, since they talk, you all have to talk loud.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we just wanted
Get
to.
closer. We can't
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we just wanted to let Judge Ogg know and her staff that we're hoping and praying that they really really think about the situation, and we're hopeful that they will come to a good conclusion about this whole situation.
hear you. And obviously, the meeting got very emotional, and so from there, Attorney Merritt and I impressed upon them that their office, not the Texas Rangers, not the Baytown Police Department, will make the decision whether this police officer will be charged or not for executing Pamela Turner, and that not only is the world watching, more importantly, the constituents of Harrison County is watching. Attorney Merritt will address you, and then we'll take a few questions.
And I don't have much to say about the meeting. I'm sure you all have questions. The main point of this meeting with the district attorney's office was to talk about process. We didn't expect them to arrive to the conclusion today. However, the family did make an impassioned plea that they take a concrete, independent look at the evidence and arrive to their own conclusions, that they provide a robust investigation that they then present to the grand jury in hopes to secure an indictment against this officer. The, we all have had experience with the Texas Rangers, and we impressed upon the district attorney that it is not her responsibility to simply sit back and wait for them to complete their investigation, but for her to send out her independent investigators, for her to gather her own evidence, and for her office to lead the investigation, direct the agencies that are responsible for gathering evidence in order to present to the grand jury. So that was our first point. It was that this was on her, and that if justice is going to be had for this family, it will be her responsibility to get it right. The other thing is that justice delayed is justice denied. We understand that Houston is a very busy city, that Harris County is a particularly busy department. This case should have a priority because it goes into the safety of every citizen in Harris County and what we will allow from police officers. And because of that, we impressed it upon her that, look, a similar case that my brother Crump is working, Danny Ray Thomas, that happened 2 years ago, and it still has not gone to trial. That is too long for any family to wait for justice. We don't expect the family of Pamela Turner to have to wait that long to have their day in court. And so we impressed that upon Ms. Ogg. I can say that Ms. Ogg did agree and that she did accept the challenge that this was her investigation.
Amen.
And that she would take the lead in gathering evidence and getting it to the grand jury.
Mr. Williams, you good? You want to say any word about our problem? Okay. All right. Go ahead, ma'am. Well, good Texas counsel who I've had the honor of working with, Attorney Lee Merritt, Attorney Darrell Washington, we have found in the past that they have judgments on police shootings where they've made a decision before they even have done an investigation. And they have such great authority and impact with district attorneys that they sometimes just accept their decision as the decision. And so, as Attorney Merritt and Attorney Williams were saying passionately in the meeting, this is your county. You get to make this decision, what you're going to present to the grand jury. And, it don't take a rocket scientist to know that the only lawyers in the room with the grand jury is you and your lawyers. So they say you can get an indictment on a ham sandwich. Well, if you don't get an indictment on the ham sandwich, then you look at the same people presenting the evidence. And so I think Attorney Merritt said it perfectly. It is on her. The only thing I would say, the county is watching. We know the world is watching, but the county is watching. And I think Lee was going to comment on Texas Rangers because he's actually here in Texas.
Yeah. The Texas Rangers often get it wrong in this regard. They believe that it is their responsibility to arrive to conclusions, and that is not their responsibility as regards to their service to Harris County. Their job is to go out and collect evidence. Their job is to go out and collect evidence and turn it over to this county. The attorneys, the Civil Rights Division here, is responsible for interpreting that evidence and presenting it to the grand jury. And so we often hear law enforcement officers make the mistake that Officer Dorr in Baytown made, which was to offer his opinion about what he believed the evidence justified or didn't justify. That is not his purview. That is not his level of expertise. That belongs to the civil rights lawyers in this department.
And let me be clear about this. What this family wants is what every other family would want, what every other American would want, and that is equal justice under the law. It's called due process of the law. And so what Kim guaranteed them that they will have a fair and thorough investigation. And what we then, Brother Merritt and Brother Williams said, but you need to send your own investigators out there. Do not accept interviews just by the Texas Rangers with witnesses, because what we know far too often is there's a great amount of discretion in who's doing the questioning. There's a great amount of discretion in how the evidence is being evaluated. So your lawyers and your investigators need to do this and not just rely on the Texas Rangers.
You're saying that the officer, she agreed
That she's going to have her own independent investigation.
That's right. She accepted her responsibility, which is what she was elected for. I'm sorry. She accepted her responsibility as the elected district attorney of this county to take the lead in this murder investigation. She also reminded this family that in the past 2 years, she's seen the indictment of 18 police officers, more than any previous administration and more than most administrations in the area. She said that as a reminder that it is her goal to objectively come to the right decision in this case.
And we know, and what we do know, is that the whole world is watching this case. Her civil rights lawyers assured us that they take the civil rights of every citizen very important. We raised the issue. This is a mentally ill person, diagnosed, confirmed, excuse me one second, confirmed to her daughter that she was in their system and they knew about her mental history. And so the big thing that we tried to impart upon the DA was the fact that they knew she was a mentally ill person when he confronted her. There are certain laws by the federal government in America that says we have a duty to protect people who are sick. It's called the American with Disabilities Act. She was diagnosed by doctors. It was clear. She was in the system. So did his training tell him when he attacked this mentally ill person to throw her to the ground, to tase her in her stomach when she said, "I'm pregnant," and then to stand over her with his knee, his leg, and not give her any kind of consideration, never to try to de-escalate this situation. In fact, it's arguable that he escalated the situation. She kept saying, "I just want to go home." And so it got to be a very passionate meeting from her daughter and her sisters who said, if this was your family member who got killed like this, what would you do? And so we think she heard them, but let's make no mistake about it. We won't be in that grand jury room. And so all the rhetoric in the world won't matter to this family nor do I believe the voters.
What were the preliminary findings of the independent autopsy?
We're still in the process of getting that information. The doctor handling the autopsy is currently doing the autopsy right now. It should be completed this afternoon, and we should know something at that point. I'd say.
We'll give you all of that when we get it. The one thing we know is this here. Attorney Williams has been on the phone nonstop this morning trying to find out the moment the autopsy is finished. We thought it was going to be done yesterday. We didn't get the body when we thought we was going to get it, but as soon as we get it, you all will know.
What do you think the autopsy will?
Well,
We don't want to give
yeah.
any kind of
Yeah.
information before we can know for sure.
A gray area when it comes to whether Pamela Turner had an active warrant against her.
Yep.
Can you speak to that?
Certainly. When you look at the things she were arrested for, they're highly questionable. I know her daughter and I spent time all last night because every time she would be arrested, her daughter and them would be trying to make sure they were doing everything they were supposed to do. And when you look at these things that they are saying she had active warrants for, look at the years they go back. It's troubling to us that they would be talking about possible warrants from years ago. And so this is going to be an issue that we want to find out. People have said over and over again, it was a misdemeanor warrant. Really? Do we expect them to have society say for a misdemeanor warrant that this guy was going to treat her like that? There are people who have felony warrants that are outstanding that don't get treated like her. And so, irrespective of what they try to say, there's no way you can justify what he did to her. And so we welcome that conversation to say, for this misdemeanor warrant, you're going to treat her like that. Her family, the reason why the family never believed that she had a warrant, they went on the system and the warrant said inactive. Her daughter, when they saw that on the news, they got together and they called the clerk, they got on the system and everything, and they saying it's a warrant, but we're looking at it saying inactive. They couldn't explain it to them, but yet they kept hearing the police say, oh, she had an active warrant, that's why he did that. We believe that was somewhat to try to re-engineer and justify what happened on that video. Yeah.
And I can't speak to the warrant situation. We know that she was in custody prior to this, less than a month prior to this incident. There were no warrants issued after the fact. So if you have a warrant while you're in custody, that's the law enforcement's opportunity to resolve them. More importantly, if there was an active warrant for some years ago, there is a right way and a wrong way to institute a warrant, particularly against someone with a mental health issue. You send out your mental health unit. You send out officers who are specially trained. I know for a fact that sending out a single officer at 10:30 at night to a project, to an apartment complex in a rougher part of the community, to independently institute a warrant, to execute a warrant, is a violation of policy. It's just not smart, if anything else. And so I'm convinced that it was simply a ruse to justify the unjustifiable, this was an unconstitutional stop in the first place. This wasn't a police action where he was perfecting a warrant. This was an independent rogue action by a bad cop.
I'm trying to understand, and I sent an email yesterday with this question.
Okay.
Why do you keep pushing the warrant thing when the current website lists 3 warrants issued in the last 2 months?
We'll be clear about this, and we'll be clear. No, don't worry about it. We welcome this question head on. Her family never had any question about a warrant. They in fact called the bail bond who they had dealt with to say, does my mother have a warrant outstanding? And they were told no. So now when they come up and say these warrants are active and so forth, we believe it's a ruse that this guy just said this to try to justify the unjustifiable, unconstitutional confrontation that he had with this lady who he knew, He knew this lady. They could have came to her apartment. If this warrant was such an important matter, why didn't they come and knock on her door and say, you have an outstanding warrant? But we just think he's trying to now justify what he did. He walked up on her, as you saw in this video, threatened her, assaulted her, and battered her, and then he said, oh, it was because she was a warrant. And consider this, the great lengths they have went through to try to criminalize her. Look at everything she's ever been arrested for. They are all misdemeanors. She always go to jail, spends 1 day, 1.5 days in jail, and is released. And on top of all of that, and we're gonna talk, on top of all of that, they're giving mental health assessments ordered by the court and all these things because everybody knows she has paranoid schizophrenia. And when a person has paranoid schizophrenia, you know there are times they're not in their right mind. And so I'm going to let her daughter explain to you exactly what their family was going through. And they was trying to move her out of this apartment complex because they kept having problems in this apartment complex. Take your time.
Right now, can you also weigh in on, did your mom talk to you about previous encounters with this particular officer?
In this apartment. Take your time, and then we're gonna end it.
Okay. To answer your question, yes, my mom has called me about an occasion, multiple occasions actually, with this specific officer, where he has showed up to her apartment in regular clothes and talking to her, threatening her, and the situation. He knew that my mom was sick, and he knew her personally. He knew where she stayed. He lives in the same apartment complex as her. My mom told me that what he had on that day when he went to her house and how he showed up with his hand on his gun to her house.
And lastly, tell
also
them about when you asked if she was in the system.
I spoke with Officer Shenevert the night that my mother was killed, and I asked him, had he ever been called for my mom before? I knew that he had, because my mom has told me about a time where he was called to her apartment and he treated her wrong as well. And I asked him, had you been called to her house before? He said yes. And I told him I knew because the conversation with my mom, and I asked, so y'all knew that she had a mental illness? And he said yes, that is in the systems.
Okay.
Also, y'all know that my mom, I had a baby on May 10th. We were trying to get my mother out of those apartments. I personally had a high-risk pregnancy, so I had to wait. And the plan was for this week, after I got out of the hospital, for me to go and have my mother moved out of those apartments. And he took that opportunity before I was even able to do so. It's just hard. It's hard knowing that she could still be here, and she's not because of this situation.
Okay. Thank you. As soon as we find out the results of the autopsy, we will let you all know. Thank you.